You know, people always say love is blind, but they never say it's broke. If you've ever had someone love you more for your bank account than for your soul, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This story's about me, Matthew Carter, born and raised in the warm sun of Jacksonville, Florida, where I grew up on sweet tea, front porch conversations, and dreams bigger than the ocean. I used to think I had it all. Big house by the beach, 3 cars in the driveway, and the kind of wardrobe that whispered, "I've made it," every time I buttoned a shirt. But all of that glimmer, all that sparkle, it wasn't gold, it was glitter, glued on by someone who never loved me, just what I could give her. Her name was Alina. And I'll tell you this much, when you lose everything, you see real fast who was just along for the ride and who actually cared about you. Back in 2015, I was riding the high of a startup gone right. Tech consulting, you know, making other people's ideas work better. I had a sharp mind, a sharper suit, and enough confidence to fill a stadium. That's when I met her. Alina. She was working a gallery opening downtown, this artsy, sleek little place that smelled like candles and money. She walked up to me with a tray of champagne flutes, but the way she looked at me? Like she already knew my net worth. "You don't look like you belong at events like this," she said with a smirk. "You look like you own the building." I laughed, and I'll admit it, I was flattered. She had that effortless beauty, the kind of hair that never looked messy even when it was, lips like cherry wine, and a laugh that could have made Wall Street traders forgive their losses. She made me feel like the most interesting man in every room. And maybe that's why I didn't ask the right questions. She moved in 2 months later. It started with small things. She never offered to pay for dinners, not once. Her rent? I covered it, temporarily, though it became permanent before I noticed. She'd bring home bags from Bloomingdale's and say, "Oh, baby, it was on sale." You wouldn't believe the discount, and I'd smile and say nothing, trying to believe it too. She had expensive taste and an even more expensive sense of entitlement. But I didn't care. Not yet. Because when you're on top, you don't think the ground can crumble beneath you. You just keep building higher. One night, after a particularly good quarter, I threw a party at the house. Catered sushi, a jazz trio, the works. Alina wore a red dress that had every man in the room forgetting their wives for a moment. And as she floated around the party like a queen, I overheard her say to one of her friends, "Oh, Matt? He's brilliant. And generous. And rich, thank God." She laughed after that, like it was a compliment. It should have been a warning. But love, real or imagined, makes you deaf to those little red flags, doesn't it? When the pandemic hit in 2020, business slowed. I tried to pivot, but the contracts dried up. Investors backed out. Within 6 months, I was bleeding money like a leaky pipe. I sold one of the cars. Cancelled the chef service. Downsized the wine deliveries. Alina noticed. Of course she did. I remember the morning I told her we'd have to move out of the beach house. She was still in bed, wrapped in white sheets, her face barely lit by the morning sun. "What do you mean, move?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "I can't afford the place anymore," I said simply. "We'll get a small apartment in Riverside, just for a while. I've got some ideas, I'll build something new." She was silent for a moment. Then. "And how long is a while?" Because I didn't sign up for scraping by, Matt. I looked at her and saw it, clear as day. Not sadness. Not worry. Just, cold calculation. And that's when it started to unravel. You ever watch someone pack a suitcase and realize they've done it before? I mean, really done it, quick, efficient, like the goodbyes already happened in their head. That was Alina the day she left. No tears. No apologies. Just a designer duffel bag and a final look that said, "You were a good chapter, but not the story." Let me rewind a bit. After I told her about the house, she didn't scream or cry. No drama. Just this eerie silence, like her mind had shifted into problem-solving mode, only the problem was me. That night, she didn't come to bed. I found her on the balcony, glass of white wine in hand, staring out at the ocean as if it had betrayed her too. "Do you still love me, Matt?" she asked without turning around. "I do," I said. And I meant it. God help me, I still did. She sipped her wine and finally looked at me. "Then why can't you just fix this? Like it was a broken faucet. Or a flat tire." I didn't have the words. Because I was trying. I was burning through contacts, chasing down leads, applying for loans, cold emailing anyone I thought might bite. But the world had changed overnight, and I was swimming upstream in a current that didn't care how hard I kicked. The next morning, she was gone. Left a note: "Matt, you're a good man, but I can't live like this. I need stability. I need to breathe. I'm sorry." No forwarding address. No phone call. She blocked me on everything. Just like that. It hit me like a sucker punch to the chest. Not just the leaving, but the how. It wasn't grief, it was embarrassment. Like I'd been conned and didn't even know it until the trick was over. I went through the motions for a few weeks. Ate whatever was left in the fridge, which wasn't much. Watched the sunrise with no one to share it with. The house echoed in a new way, too big for one person and too full of ghosts. I sold it a month later. Moved into a one-bedroom in Riverside. Peeling paint on the ceiling, a leaky faucet, and neighbors who argued through the walls. But it was mine, and I wasn't drowning anymore. And something strange happened in that tiny apartment. I started dreaming again. Not about money, or luxury, or the kind of life that impresses people at dinner parties. No, I started dreaming about purpose. One morning, I was walking to the corner coffee shop when I saw a flyer taped to a pole. Commercial kitchen space for rent, affordable rates for local food startups. Something about it stopped me cold. See, I used to love cooking. Way back before the suits and stock options. My mom ran a soul food truck when I was a kid, nothing fancy, but folks would line up around the block for her fried catfish and peach cobbler. I still had her recipes. I still had her in my heart. And for the first time in years, I thought, what if I stopped trying to impress and just tried to create? So, I cashed out what was left of my savings. Took a risk that wasn't strategic or advised by a business analyst. I rented that kitchen. Bought second-hand equipment. Printed a few hundred flyers. I called it Carter's Comforts. Started with small orders, local deliveries, weekend stalls at farmers markets. Fried chicken sandwiches that melted in your mouth. Mac and cheese so rich it should have come with a warning label. And always, always, my mama's peach cobbler. At first, it was slow. I was exhausted. Broke. But every customer who smiled after a bite? Every, "Damn, this tastes like my grandma's kitchen." That was gold. Real gold, not the kind you wear, the kind you feel. And then one day, 3 months in, I met her. Lena. She showed up at the Saturday market wearing a band tee, sunglasses way too big for her face, and carrying a beat-up camera. She said she was doing a photo series on local small businesses. "Mind if I shoot a few pics?" she asked, already clicking away. I shrugged. "Only if you promise not to catch me mid-chicken flip." She laughed, a real laugh, belly and all, and just like that, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Ease. No games. No seduction. Just connection. But we'll get to that. Because the kicker of it all? A year later, when the line for Carter's Comforts wrapped around 2 corners, when local news ran a segment calling me the comeback cook, when I was finally standing on something solid again. Alina came back. Oh yeah. She came back. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays are usually slow in the food world, too far from the weekend for crowds, too early in the week for cravings. I was back at the kitchen after a long morning at the market, trying to perfect a new spicy honey glaze that Lena swore needed more kick. Music was playing low, Sam Cooke, one of those songs that makes your chest ache a little. And then came the knock. Not at the kitchen door. At my door. My apartment. 3 soft taps. I thought it might be a delivery. Maybe Lena forgot her camera again. But when I opened it, there she was. Alina. She hadn't changed much. Same flawless skin, same polished nails, same smug little tilt of her chin that used to make me feel lucky. Except now, it made me feel something else. Like nausea and déjà vu mixed in a cocktail I didn't order. Hey, she said, with a soft smile like we'd just run into each other at the grocery store. Hey. I repeated, blinking. I saw the article, she said, gesturing vaguely like the newspaper feature was still floating in the air between us. Carter's Comforts. I watched the news clip. You're doing really well. I stepped aside halfway, leaning against the door frame. Took you long enough. Her smile faltered, just for a second. I was in a bad place, Matt. I panicked back then. I didn't know how to deal with all of it. You mean when I wasn't rich anymore? I said it calm, but there was heat beneath my ribs. She looked down at her shoes. Designer flats. Real leather. She hadn't fallen too far. I didn't come to fight. I came to apologize. And maybe, ask if we could talk. Over coffee. Or, her voice dropped to that syrupy tone I remembered, the one that used to undo me, maybe dinner? I almost laughed. But instead, I said, sure. Her face lit up. That smile again. The one that used to make me stupid. I walked to the coat rack. Grabbed my jacket. Slid on my shoes. Then I turned and said, you can come to the market this Saturday. I'll serve you the same plate as everyone else. But that's it. No coffee. No dinner. We're not doing that. She blinked. Confused. Matt, I thought, after everything, we might. You left me when the money left. And now you're back because it's returned. That's not love, Alina. That's accounting. I opened the door wider. And the books are closed. She stood there, frozen. Probably not used to doors opening away from her. And certainly not used to someone not begging her to stay. She stepped out slowly. Turned halfway down the hall. Then looked back over her shoulder like she expected me to run after her. I didn't. I closed the door. Locked it. And leaned my head against the frame, breathing deep. Not because it hurt. But because I realized it didn't anymore. Later that evening, Lena showed up with a bottle of wine and 2 little pies from some local bakery she loved. Why do I feel like you had a long day? She asked, curling up on my couch like she belonged there, which, by then, she kind of did. I told her about Alina. Not the whole saga, just enough. She didn't flinch. Didn't get weird. Just listened. When I finished, she said, well, she missed out. But hey, at least she got to see the line for Carter's Comforts. She didn't even get to taste the peach cobbler, I smirked. Her loss. Lena raised her glass. To peach cobbler? I asked. To choosing better, she replied, clinking her glass with mine. And that, folks, was the moment I knew, really knew, that I'd made it. Not back to the top. But back to myself. You ever fall in love in a kitchen? Not the grand kind with chandeliers and French doors. I'm talking about a hot, slightly cramped commercial space with a perpetually humming fridge and saw-stained aprons hanging like war flags. The kind where you learn more about a person over the sizzle of oil than you ever could over candlelit dinners. That's where Lena and I started becoming something real. After the whole Alina situation, I thought I'd feel some kind of emotional hangover. But honestly, I just felt light. Like the last bag of bricks had finally been lifted off my back. And there was Lena, every Saturday morning, sliding in with her camera, a new thrifted scarf, and a fresh playlist full of soul and funk that got the kitchen dancing before the customers even showed up. She started helping more, too. At first it was little things, folding napkins, wiping down tables, snapping a few photos for our social media page, which I barely even knew how to use until she stepped in. But soon enough, she was behind the counter, plating cobbler like a pro, her hands working in rhythm with mine. And Lord, the way she talked to customers. There was this one lady, probably pushing 80, who came in looking real grumpy, like someone had stolen her last good nerve. Lena handed her a tray and said, "You look like you've had a long week. Sit. Let us feed your soul." The woman left smiling. Said it tasted like her mama's Sunday table. Lena just had that effect. Now, business wasn't just growing. It was booming. We got written up in a foodie blog that called us a Southern hug in every bite. Orders doubled. A local brewery asked to partner up for Friday nights. And by summer, we had enough saved to start thinking about a second location. But more than that, I was growing. Not just into a business owner again, but into a man who had learned what enough meant. I used to think success meant fancy things. Rolexes, rooftop parties, leather seats that warmed your backside in the winter. But now? Success was watching a kid try fried okra for the first time and light up like it was candy. It was handwritten thank you notes tucked into the tip jar. It was waking up next to someone who wasn't with me for the flash, but for the fire that kept us both going. One evening, we stayed late in the kitchen. I was restocking the fridge. Lena was playing Billie Holiday through a beat-up speaker. And out of nowhere she said, "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" It took me a second to realize she meant Alina. I leaned on the counter and thought about it. "I don't know," I said. "Some days, I think I already have. Other days, I want to send her a copy of my taxes labeled, 'You left too soon.'" Lena chuckled. "Fair. But truth is," I continued, "I'm glad she left. I wouldn't be here if she didn't." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she walked over, real close, and whispered, "And I'm real glad you're here." We kissed. And let me tell you, nothing burns hotter than a kiss in a kitchen where you've both poured your sweat and dreams into every corner. We weren't perfect. Lord knows we had our squabbles. One time I left a pan of collard greens on too long and set off the smoke alarm, and she didn't let me live it down for weeks. But we had something solid. Something cooked slow, seasoned with laughter, and served with a side of respect. That night, after we cleaned up, we sat on the floor with 2 bowls of cobbler and a bottle of cheap red wine. "Ever think about the future?" she asked, feet brushing against mine. "All the time," I said. "But for once, I'm not in a rush to get there." She smiled, and in that smile, I saw the life I didn't even know I wanted 5 years ago. The thing about second chances? They're trickier than firsts. The stakes feel higher. The bruises haven't faded yet. But still, you lean into them, hoping this time, the road won't crack beneath your feet. Carter's Comforts was riding high. We just wrapped up a food festival downtown, 3 days of non-stop orders, interviews with food vloggers, and a line that made our first Saturday market stall feel like a warm-up act. Lena and I had barely slept, living off coffee and corner kisses in between shifts, but Lord, we were alive. Bone tired, soul full. Then came the email. Subject line: Opportunity for expansion, national market interest. It was from a company out of Chicago. Some big distribution chain that wanted to license my recipes, start packaging and selling Carter's Comforts meals in grocery stores across the country. Now, old me? He would have said yes before the ink dried. Money. Recognition. National brand status. Boom. But the me sitting in that kitchen with Lena, watching her scoop mac and cheese for a regular who called her sunshine with seasoning? That me wasn't so sure. I waited 2 days before I showed her the email. We were closing up, lights low, the fryer still hissing its last sigh of the night. I slid my phone over and said, "Read this." She scanned it quickly, then slower. I watched her face, how her brows tugged in the middle, how she bit the corner of her lip. When she finally looked up, she just said, "Wow." "I know," I said. "It's huge." She nodded. "It's something." That pause? That tiny, almost invisible hesitation? It told me everything. We walked home that night in silence. Not tense. Just quiet. Thinking. In the apartment, over 2 beers and a couple slices of leftover cornbread, I finally asked, "You're not excited?" She took a deep breath. "I'm proud of you. And I mean that. But Matt, you built something real. People don't just come for the food. They come for you. For this story. For the way you look them in the eye and ask about their mama's surgery. You can't box that and stick it in aisle 12 of a supermarket." I looked down, spinning my bottle on the table. "So you think I shouldn't do it?" "I think," she leaned in, touching my hand, "you need to figure out if you're still chasing something, or if maybe, you've already caught it." The next day, I drove out to the beach. The same beach house was still there, different paint, new owners, couple of palm trees trimmed back, but I parked nearby and sat with my window down, letting the salty air hit my face. I thought about Alina. About the emptiness of that house, even when it was full of things. I thought about Lena, about her dancing to Otis Redding in a flour-dusted apron. About the way customers' faces lit up when we remembered their names. About purpose. I didn't respond to the email that day. Then, just when I thought life had given me enough plot twists, he walked into the kitchen. One slow Thursday, just before closing, a man I hadn't seen in years came through the door. Brandon. Old college buddy. Old business partner. Back when we first launched the tech startup that got me my fortune. We had split ways early, disagreements over ethics, finances, direction. I took a buyout and moved on. He kept the brand, took it bigger. And now here he was, in a suit that probably cost more than my kitchen's fridge, holding a takeout menu and smirking like no time had passed. Well. The comfort king himself. "Brandon," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Didn't expect to see you slumming it." He laughed. "Heard about your business. Had to come see for myself. Looks like you're doing all right." "I am," I said. "Thanks. Still got that hustle, huh?" he grinned. "Actually, that's why I'm here." I braced myself. "Listen," he said, leaning on the counter, "I'm putting together a new venture. High-end food delivery. Think DoorDash meets boutique cuisine. You'd be perfect. Bring Carter's Comforts under the umbrella. Big pay. Real equity. And you wouldn't be sweating over fryers every day." I stared at him for a beat. Then said, "I like sweating over fryers." He laughed again, but this time it sounded a little nervous. I shook my head. "I built this. Every order. Every spoon. I didn't claw my way back from the dirt just to hand it over to someone like you." He shrugged, pushing back from the counter. "Your loss, Matt. Could have been something big again." As he walked out, Lena stepped from the back, wiping her hands on a towel. "Friend of yours?" "Not really," I said. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't afraid to turn down money anymore. Because I wasn't poor. Not in any way that mattered. They say pressure makes diamonds. But let me tell you, pressure can also make pipes burst, tempers flare, and dreams teeter real close to falling off a ledge. It started with the grease trap. Now, if you've never worked in a kitchen, you probably don't know what that is. Think of it like the unsung hero that keeps the whole place from turning into a slip-and-slide of doom. Ours had been acting up for a while, draining slow, giving off that funky smell you try to cover with lemon rinds and prayer. We were saving up to replace it. But time wasn't on our side. One Friday night, right in the middle of a packed dinner rush, it happened. Boom. The trap gave out. Grease and water flooded the back line. Slippery, stinking chaos. Lena was plating 3 orders of hot chicken sliders when it happened. She slipped, caught herself on the prep table, and hollered, "Matt, we're going down like the Titanic back here." I rushed in, slipped too, banged my elbow hard against the freezer door. The delivery guy shouted from the front, "Y'all need a boat," and some of the customers laughed, bless them. But I knew right then, we were done for the night. We closed early. Lost half a day's worth of orders. The cleanup took hours. And the worst part? We had a catering gig lined up the next morning. A big one. 40 people. Some artsy real estate mixer. Exactly the kind of job that could lead to more steady, upscale clients. Lena sat beside me on an upturned crate while we waited for the plumber, both of us smelling like fryer oil and frustration. "I could cry," she said softly. "I already did," I said. "Twice." Silently. Like a man. She leaned into me and laughed, but it was that tired laugh. The kind you give when you're 2 bad hours away from throwing in the towel. "We can't cancel tomorrow," she said. "I know," I whispered. "We won't." So we improvised. We borrowed a friend's small kitchen space downtown, an old cafe that was closed for the weekend. Packed everything we could into coolers, trays, foil, boxes. We prepped through the night, slept in shifts in the van, and somehow managed to show up at that event smiling, fresh-pressed, and with a spread that looked like it was served by angels in aprons. The feedback? Rave reviews. People asked if we catered weddings. Lena got offered a photography gig. One of the realtors asked if she was the wife, and she didn't correct them. She just smiled and said, something like that. But here's the part that really shook me. 2 days later, I got a call from Ray, the plumber who helped patch things up. I liked Ray. Straight shooter. His hands always smelled faintly of WD-40 and mint gum. "Matt," he said, "I'm gonna be honest with you, buddy. That trap? You're living on borrowed time. The whole understructure's rusted through. You're 1 leak away from mold, and the health department don't play." He gave me a number. It was big. Real big. I hung up and stared at the kitchen walls, our walls, chipped paint and all. We didn't have enough in reserves. We just spent a chunk fixing up the van, ordering branded packaging, trying to grow smarter. I thought about calling the licensing company back. Or Brandon. But my stomach turned at the thought. Lena noticed something was off. That evening, we sat on the rooftop of our apartment building, legs dangling off the edge, watching the sky bleed orange into night. "Talk to me," she said. So I did. I told her about Ray. The cost. The slow crawl toward empty accounts. The pit in my gut that whispered, maybe you can't pull this off. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Okay. Okay? We'll figure it out. One step at a time. Maybe we launch a fundraiser. A special pop-up event. Limited time menu. People love scarcity. I blinked. You think that's enough? She looked at me, dead serious. I think we're enough. And just like that, the fear didn't disappear, but it quieted. We launched the Fix the Trap feast that weekend. Lena designed the flyers. I created a one-night-only menu based on my mama's Sunday dinners. Word got around fast. Regulars came, brought friends, shared it online. Local musicians offered to play for free. People slipped us extra 20s in the tip jar and said, "Keep going." By the end of the night, we had enough to cover the repairs and then some. I stood behind the counter, apron stained, hair messy, Lena hugging me from behind as I watched our little kitchen glow under the soft string lights. "This place is gonna outlive us," I whispered. She kissed my cheek. "That's the goal." Funny how life always circles back. Just when you think you've cleaned out all the closets, some old ghost rattles the doorknob. This one came wearing my last name. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. The kind where the city yawns slow, the coffee brews a little stronger, and the prep station hums with routine. Lena was chopping collards. I was kneading biscuit dough and singing something that vaguely resembled a Marvin Gaye tune, off-key, as usual. The bell over the door jingled, and I didn't even look up when I said, "We open at 11, but you're welcome to hang out, smell the magic in progress." Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in over 15 years. "Always said you had the touch, little brother." I dropped the dough. I turned. And there he was. David. My brother. Same eyes as mine, just duller now. He looked tired. Older than he should have. Hair grayer than it used to be. He wore a beat-up army green jacket and held a duffel like he'd just stepped off a bus from nowhere. You look like you've been through it," I said, grabbing a towel to wipe my hands. "Life has a way," he muttered, stepping inside, eyes scanning the place. Lena popped her head around the corner, saw my face, then his, and froze. "You okay?" she mouthed. I nodded. "Barely. Let me back up. David and I were tight once. We grew up sharing a bunk bed and a love for Mama's grits. He was the older one, always getting into trouble, always charming his way out of it. I was the one who cleaned up after. He left home at 19, chasing dreams that didn't always like being chased. Over the years, he'd drift in and out of my life like a summer storm, quick, loud, gone. Last I heard, he'd been living in Arizona, working construction. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since Mama's funeral. He'd missed it. So yeah. Seeing him standing there, duffel in hand, looking like a ghost in broad daylight? It shook me. We sat in the back, cups of black coffee steaming between us. Lena gave us space, but I could feel her watching from the prep window, just in case. "You been alright?" I asked, keeping it casual. David shrugged. "Alive. That count?" I nodded. "That counts." He looked around the kitchen. "This yours?" "Mine and hers," I said, tilting my head toward Lena. "Carter's comforts." He smiled, slow. "Mama would have loved that." "Yeah," I said. "She would have." Silence hung thick between us, full of things neither of us wanted to dig up. Finally, he said, "I need a place to stay. Just for a little while. Things back west didn't work out." There it was. I won't lie, my first instinct was no. Flat out. Old wounds still throbbed. But I looked at him, really looked, and I saw it, under the rough edges and the sunken cheeks, the same boy who once gave me his Halloween candy when I cried because mine melted. And besides, how could I say no after everything I'd been through? After being shown grace I hadn't earned? I gave him the keys to the pull-out bed in the spare room. "House rules," I said. You clean up after yourself. You help around here if you want to stay longer than a week. No freeloading. He gave a half smile. Same old Matt. I grinned back. You're lucky I still believe in redemption arcs. The first few days were rocky. He was quiet, restless, and clearly not used to early mornings or steady routines. But he helped. Took out the trash, did dishes, even jumped in during a Sunday rush to run orders when we were short-staffed. And wouldn't you know, customers loved him. He had that same old charm, like he could talk a cop out of a ticket or a grandma out of her secret pie recipe. Lena, though? She was cautious. One night after closing, she pulled me aside. You sure about this? She asked. He seems slippery. I nodded. I'm not blind. But I need to try. She sighed. All right. I'll trust your gut. But just know, I've got your back if this turns sideways. Then came the Sunday dinner. We started hosting them once a month, big communal meals for regulars, neighbors, anyone who needed food or family. Long tables. Candles in mason jars. Gospel music humming soft in the background. That night, as folks laughed and passed cornbread down the line, David stood up and raised a glass of sweet tea. To my brother, he said, voice loud and clear. Who's done what most men only talk about? Built something real. Something beautiful. People clapped. I tried not to cry into my mashed potatoes. After dinner, he helped clean up. Quiet. Focused. When it was just us, he said, Matt. I'm sorry. For missing the funeral. For disappearing. For being the kind of man Mama wouldn't have been proud of. I looked at him, the words catching in my throat. Then I said, you're here now. That's gotta count for something. The thing about life? It rarely wraps up in a neat little bow. It's more like one of Mama's peach cobblers, messy edges, bubbling over, too hot in the middle. But when it cools just right, oh, baby, it's magic. That final chapter snuck up on me like a lazy Sunday. David had been with us a month by then. And honestly, it was going well. Shockingly well. He was steady. Helped out in the kitchen. Even started fixing things around the shop, old hinges, the sticky back door, a busted light in the pantry no one had touched in a year. He even got Lena to laugh. That's when I knew I needed to be careful. Because life had been too smooth for a beat, and I've lived long enough to know, peace is often the silence before the thunder. Sure enough, the storm came. One Thursday morning, I came in early, and the safe was open. Cash drawer empty. My heart dropped. I ran through the possibilities, my brain working faster than my feet as I checked cameras, only to find the recorder was conveniently offline. Lena walked in while I was still staring at the screen. What's going on? I didn't want to say it, not out loud. But the name sat on my tongue like something sour. David, I finally said. He's gone. So is the cash. She didn't say I told you so. Didn't flinch. Just stood next to me, still and quiet. Like she knew this pain before. I waited 3 days. Tried his phone. No response. I called a friend back west, confirmed what I'd feared. David had pulled a similar move before. Took a job, built trust, then disappeared with just enough to make a getaway. I sat on the back steps of the kitchen that night, head in my hands, trying to hold down the rage and the shame. Lena brought me a mug of sweet tea and said, "It's not your fault." But it felt like my fault. Like I'd opened the door to the wolf, handed him the keys, and said, "Mi casa es su casa." I thought he changed, I muttered. He probably wanted to, she said. But some people can't outrun the part of themselves they've been feeding for too long. The next day, I walked into the kitchen and felt different. Not broken. Not angry. Resolved. I called a staff meeting, told the team what had happened, and what we were going to do. We don't stop. We don't spiral. We adjust, we learn, and we keep serving food that heals people. They clapped. I almost cried again. Apparently, that's my thing now. Lena squeezed my hand under the table. That weekend, something beautiful happened. One of our regulars, Mrs. Dolores, late 70s, cane with a bedazzled handle, sass for days, stood up during Sunday dinner. Matthew Carter, she declared, pointing that cane like it was a gavel, I've been eating your food since you was just a tall drink of water at the market stall. And I gotta say, sugar, you've made this place more than a restaurant. You've made it a home. The whole room applauded. I stood up to thank her, and someone from the back yelled, "Speech." So I gave one. Impromptu, cracked voice, soul bared. I've lost a lot to get here. Money. Pride. Family. But somehow, all that loss made room for what matters. You. This kitchen. This love. Lena slipped her arm around my waist. And if this is as big as it ever gets, this humble little kitchen with its creaky floorboards and gospel on the radio, then I've already won. Months later, we got married. Nothing fancy. Backyard barbecue. Friends, food, laughter. I wore a blue shirt. Lena wore yellow. She said it matched the joy. We catered our own reception, because of course we did. And after we cleaned up, long after the guests had gone home, Lena and I sat on the kitchen counter, legs swinging like teenagers, sharing the last slice of cobbler. You ever think about what she'd say? Lena asked softly. I smiled. Mama? She nodded. I think she'd say. You finally figured out the recipe, baby. Took you long enough. We both laughed. And then I kissed her. Epilogue, one last note. Alina never came back again. David sent a postcard a year later from Reno. No return address. It just said, I saw your name in a magazine. You made something good. I'm sorry I couldn't. I didn't write back. Not because I hate him. But because some goodbyes don't need replies. So that's my story. I was the man who had it all, lost it, and found something better in the rubble. A kitchen. A woman. A purpose. And every day, I still make Mama's cobbler, just the way she taught me. Crust a little messy. Filling rich with cinnamon and love. A little too much butter. A lot of soul. And that first bite? It always tastes like home.